There's a strange kind of man she never forgets. Not the one who begged, not the one who made grand declarations or tried to prove his worth with loud gestures. No, the man who stays in her mind long after he's gone is the one who knew how to detach emotionally without turning bitter. That's rare. And it's precisely because it's rare that it's powerful. That kind of man doesn't vanish in rage. He doesn't ghost out of weakness. He steps back with clarity, with intention. His silence is not void, it's full. It's alive with restraint, with quiet resolve, and it leaves a deeper imprint than shouting ever could. Probably most men don't realize how closely women observe the emotional tone in a goodbye. They don't understand the weight of walking away without resentment. They think staying loud, staying dramatic is the only way to be remembered. But the truth is, women are far more attuned to subtlety. They feel your absence more than your presence when it's grounded in control. You think she's forgotten you because you didn't argue, didn't fight for your spot, but what she really remembers is how you didn't need to. That's what haunts her. You see, when you detach with bitterness, when you fall into resentment or pettiness, you're still giving her your energy. You're still wrapped up in her. You're reacting, and in doing so, you show that she still holds the strings. But when you can let go without hating her, when you can walk away with composure, you show her something far more threatening, indifference born of self-respect. That kind of detachment is unsettling because it implies that you know your worth without needing her validation. And once a woman senses that, something shifts inside her. She begins to question, not you, but herself. Why didn't he need to fight? Why didn't he plead? Did he know something I didn't? Was I not as necessary as I thought I was? That silence echoes in her mind because it challenges the part of her ego that expected your desperation. She expected a version of you that crumbled when she left, but you didn't. And in not crumbling, you shattered her expectation. The man who detaches without bitterness doesn't do it to manipulate. That's the difference. He's not playing a game, he's simply at peace with reality. He doesn't chase after someone who chose to walk away. He doesn't degrade himself by begging for closure. He doesn't fill his days talking about her or trying to make her jealous. He uses that space to return to himself, to reinforce the internal structures that keep him standing tall no matter who stays or leaves. And that quiet rebuilding, the kind that's done in private, in discipline, in solitude, is what gives his absence gravity. You have to understand that when you stop giving energy to someone who took it for granted, it disrupts the narrative they built around your relationship. She told herself you couldn't live without her. She told herself you'd spiral, you'd suffer, that your identity would unravel. But when you detach with grace, you rewrite that narrative. You introduce doubt, and that doubt lingers. It lingers in the silence between your last words. It lingers in the space where your name used to come up in her phone. It lingers in the moment she wonders if you were really as attached as she thought, or if maybe, just maybe, you were always capable of walking away on your own terms. Detachment without bitterness is not weakness. It is not indifference either. It's strength under control. It's the recognition that not every emotional experience needs to be externalized, that not every loss demands a performance. And more than anything, it's a commitment to never let anyone pull you out of alignment with yourself. That is the man she remembers. Not because he tried to be unforgettable, but because he was complete before she entered his life. And when she left, that completeness remained untouched. Now, you might be tempted to respond when she starts to reach out again. Maybe she sends a casual message, maybe she likes one of your old photos. That's the moment of the test, because if your detachment was real, you won't need to react. You'll smile maybe, acknowledge the pull, but you won't chase the echo of what used to be, because you understand this. When a man masters the art of letting go without hate, he becomes the standard by which all others are measured, not in arrogance, but in presence. His absence is a statement, a quiet, steady reminder that not every man breaks when a woman leaves, and the ones who don't stay with her longest. And that, in the end, is how she remembers him. Not for what he said, but for what he refused to say. The man who learns to understand emotional energy, not just his own, but hers too, is the one who begins to play the long game. Not in a manipulative way, not in some clever strategic dance, but in a way that roots itself in depth and emotional intelligence. Because here's the truth. When she hugs you, when she reaches out, when she shares even a fleeting moment of closeness, there's an exchange taking place that's far more powerful than it appears on the surface. If you can sense what she's giving in that moment, and more importantly, if you know how to respond without overwhelming it, you become unforgettable. Most men think they need to dominate a moment to make it count. They believe they need to impress, to perform, to make it clear that they're strong, that they're desirable. But the ones who are remembered aren't the ones who pushed. They're the ones who received. They're the ones who knew how to let her energy land, how to accept the emotional signal without scrambling to reciprocate or to top it. You have to understand, in that simple act, whether it's a hug, a glance, or a moment of silence, she's offering something of herself. And if you rush in with your own agenda, you miss it. You miss her. You overwrite her emotional offering with your own performance. When a woman leans into you, she's not just doing it for comfort, she's watching how you hold the space. Do you get nervous? Do you try to escalate it? Do you rush into flirtation, into words, into control? Or do you remain still, grounded, steady, like someone who understands that this moment matters more than the next one? The man who holds that space, who knows how to breathe through it rather than fill it with noise, becomes something rare. He becomes safe, but not in a boring way. Safe in a magnetic way. She knows you're not going to drop her emotionally. And that kind of certainty is what burns into memory. See, she might not consciously know why she keeps thinking about you. She might not even fully understand why your name resurfaces when she's alone, or why your presence lingers long after the conversation ends. But deep down, it's because your energy wasn't chaotic. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't chase validation. You received her presence, and in doing so, you gave her what most men are too anxious or too self-absorbed to offer: emotional attunement. And here's where it becomes even more powerful. When you sense that moment and you stay grounded, you're not only staying in control of yourself, you're allowing her to see herself more clearly in your presence. You're acting as a mirror, not a competitor. You're not reacting, you're reflecting. That kind of dynamic awakens something in her. It opens a space inside her mind where you become the man she returns to emotionally again and again, because she felt seen. Not for how she looked or what she said, but for who she was beneath all of it. There's a profound distinction between reacting to someone and responding to them. Reaction is instinctive. It's quick, emotional, often self-serving. But a response, that's conscious, it's measured, it's rooted in awareness. And when she steps into your space with that hug, that touch, that subtle connection, and you respond rather than react, it tells her something. This man isn't going to lose himself. He isn't going to collapse under the weight of affection or vanish the second things get quiet. He can hold the charge without scrambling to discharge it. And that, in the deepest sense, is attractive. Because attraction isn't about flash, it's about depth, it's about restraint, it's about the kind of presence that doesn't need to dominate to feel valuable. Most women have encountered countless men who are either too distant or too desperate, but when she meets the man who can feel her energy, who can read the room and still remain sovereign within himself, he becomes unforgettable. Not because he said something perfect, not because he touched her the right way, but because he didn't chase her emotions. He held space for them. Now, that kind of mastery doesn't happen overnight. It requires you to tune into your own nervous system, to become aware of your own triggers, your own impulses, to learn how to sit with tension without trying to escape it. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first, but over time, it becomes natural. You learn to breathe, you learn to observe, you learn to feel what's happening without rushing to change it. And so you realize that presence is true, still presence is what sets you apart. So when the moment comes, and it will, When she leans into you, when she offers a moment of softness, don't fill it with noise. Don't panic. Don't try to impress. Just be there. Breathe. Let her know through your stillness that you are not going to flee from emotional gravity, that you can feel her without flinching. Because that kind of stillness, that kind of presence, is what stays with her long after the moment is over. There's a subtle art in the way you touch her, especially in a moment like a hug. And it's not about intensity or confidence, as most might assume. It's about awareness. It's about being so deeply attuned to her that you know exactly how to apply just enough presence to ground her, to center her, to make her feel like the world can pause for just a second. And the strange thing is, it's not even about doing something particularly memorable in the conventional sense. It's about doing less, but with more consciousness. That's what echoes. When a man hugs a woman with that kind of intentional awareness, it leaves a mark, not on her skin, on her nervous system, because women are exquisitely tuned into energy. And the body doesn't lie. You can say all the right things, you can miss it, wear the right clothes, play the part. But if your energy in that moment is disconnected, rushed, insecure, or needy, she might not say it. She might not even consciously process it, but her body will pull away. The body always knows when something isn't congruent. So imagine this. You're standing in front of her, and you've already sensed there's an invitation, an openness, a softness, a vulnerability. Maybe she leans in first. Maybe she brushes your arm, closes the distance. And in that moment, you wrap your arms around her, but not to take, not to control, not to escalate. You do it to hold. And that's the distinction that matters. Because holding isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's about allowing her to feel that you're fully there, that you're not somewhere else in your head thinking about where it's going or what you're getting from it. You're just there, anchored. Now, most men underestimate what that kind of presence can do to a woman. She lives in a world that's constantly rushing her, constantly pulling at her attention, constantly asking her to be everything to everyone. But when you hug her with awareness, with slowness, with a kind of quiet reverence, you become the exception. You give her nervous system permission to settle. You invite her back into her body. That's no small thing. That's a rare experience. And the moment it happens, you become someone she remembers, not just mentally, but somatically. Her body will remember you. But here's where it gets deeper. The man who touches her in this way isn't doing it to create an outcome. He's not hugging her to seduce her. He's not playing a game. He's simply rooted in the moment because he understands the value of it. And because he understands that, he carries a kind of emotional weight that makes him unforgettable. She can feel it in the way his hand rests on her back, not gripping, not rushing, just holding. She can sense it in the way he breathes, not erratic, not shallow, but steady, like he's grounded in something deeper than attraction. And she'll notice too what he doesn't do. He doesn't overtalk. He doesn't make it about himself. He doesn't joke to diffuse the intimacy. He lets the silence breathe. And that might sound simple, but it's rare because silence requires confidence. Stillness requires maturity. And emotional presence requires the kind of self-acknowledge most people spend their lives avoiding. But when you can bring that to a woman, especially in a moment as intimate and as seemingly ordinary as a hug, you transcend the ordinary. You become, in her emotional memory, something entirely different. And she'll think about that. Not because she's infatuated, not because you triggered some fantasy, but because for once she was allowed to relax into the moment without having to manage it. And that is what makes a man unforgettable. Not the grand gestures, not the perfectly executed charm, but the ability to hold a moment like it matters, because it does. I'll tell you something even more powerful. When you embody that level of awareness and emotional discipline, you don't just affect her, you change the dynamic between you. Because now she's not the only one feeling exposed or seen. Now she's looking at you differently. She's wondering who you are. She's wondering why her body trusted you so quickly. She's wondering what it is about you that made her feel like she could let go for just a second. And that wonder, that question, that's what sticks. That's what plays in the back of her mind when she's lying in bed at night. That's what resurfaces when she hears your name. That's what lingers. Not the hug itself, but the presence you brought into it. Because presence, real presence, leaves fingerprints on the soul. So the next time you touch her, especially in a moment like that, don't rush, don't force, just hold. Let her feel that you're not going anywhere, that you're not afraid of emotional weight, that you're not another man trying to escape the depth she carries. Let her feel that, and you'll stay with her long after you've gone. There's something remarkable about the way a woman's mind registers a subtle act of strength, especially when that strength isn't loud, isn't aggressive, isn't there to dominate. It's quiet, collected, in control. And one of the most understated yet powerful forms of this strength is restraint, not the kind born from repression, not the forced sort of holding back that eventually implodes, but the kind of restraint that stems from depth, self-awareness, and intentionality. A man who understands how to apply this kind of restraint during a deeply emotional moment, say a hug, has already set himself apart. You see, physical contact, especially a hug, can be incredibly charged. It's not just two bodies pressing together, it's an energetic exchange. It's vulnerability. It's a doorway to intimacy. And most men, when they get close to that doorway, either barge through it or back away in fear. But the man who can stand at the edge of that threshold, fully aware of its depth, and still choose to remain composed, he sends a different signal entirely. Because women don't just remember what you did, they remember what you chose not to do. They remember the moment you could have leaned in further and didn't. The moment you could have escalated and instead stayed present. That's what creates tension. Not the cheap, manipulative kind, but the sacred, magnetic kind. The kind that makes her wonder, the kind that lingers. Imagine this, she's in your arms and the moment hangs between you. She feels safe, maybe even a little exposed, and for a split second, she waits to see what you'll do next. Will you go for more? Will you lose the moment to impulse? Or will you honor it by simply staying with it, grounded, attentive, patient? And if you can do that, if you can hold her and not need to take more, if you can let the hug be enough, you communicate something very rare. You tell her that you're not ruled by desire, even when you feel it, that you're not desperate for closeness, even when it's right there in front of you, that you don't need her to collapse into you for you to feel powerful. Instead, you're powerful because you don't need it. You're already whole. And that kind of restraint, real restraint, is unforgettable. It's what makes her think about you later, not with the kind of fleeting curiosity that comes from physical thrill, but with a deeper respect, even awe. Because now she's seen a man who had access to something tender, something emotionally rich, and didn't try to consume it. He just let it be. He just was. That's emotional strength. That's discipline. And that's what carves itself into her memory. And it's important to recognize how rare this is for her. She lives in a world where people are always reaching, always grabbing, always taking more than they give. So when a man enters her world and simply holds space, without demanding, without rushing, without crossing lines, she doesn't forget that. Because now the experience of being with you isn't tainted by anxiety or confusion or regret. It's clean, it's clear, it's potent, and it gives her something far more valuable than validation. It gives her safety. It gives her respect. Restraint in this sense becomes a kind of emotional leadership. You set the tone, you show her through your actions that intimacy doesn't need to be hurried, that closeness doesn't need to be conquered, that affection can exist without being consumed. And by doing that, you allow her to exhale. You allow her to feel seen, not as an object, not as a prize, but as a person. And what's more, when you exercise that kind of restraint, it creates a beautiful paradox. She begins to want more, not because you manipulated her into it, not because you played some reverse psychology game, but because your strength gave her the freedom to desire rather than defend. You became a space she could enter, not a force she had to brace against. So much of what draws someone back to a person long after the interaction is over is the feeling they left behind, the trace of emotional safety, the memory of being held without being handled, the rare experience of being physically close to someone who wasn't trying to extract anything. That's what makes the moment echo. So when you're in that moment, when you feel the pull to go further, to do more, to press in, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what communicates more power here? Reaching for more or allowing what is to be enough? Because the man who chooses the latter doesn't lose anything. He builds something. Slowly, deliberately, respectfully. And in doing so, he becomes the man who stays on her mind long after she's let go. Because restraint, when it's real, becomes unforgettable. When you understand the weight of presence, true presence, you begin to realize how rare and powerful it is. We're not talking about simply being physically there. We're not talking about standing next to someone or sitting across from them and nodding on cue. We're talking about something much deeper than that. Being attuned, grounded, and intensely focused on the person in front of you. So much so that time itself seems to pause for them. That's presence. And when a woman encounters it, especially in a man, it doesn't just affect her, it reaches something in her that most people never even try to touch. You see, we live in a world that's distracted. Everyone's looking over your shoulder, checking their phone, thinking about their next move, waiting for their turn to speak instead of truly listening. Most conversations feel transactional, most interactions are rushed, and because of that, most people feel unseen, unfelt, disconnected. But now imagine what happens when you break that pattern. Imagine the impact when a man walks into that environment, not with flashy charm or shallow charisma, but with depth, with stillness, with a kind of calm that tells her, I'm not just here to get something, I'm here to experience something real. When you hug her and you're present, not thinking about what comes next, not performing, not calculating, but fully immersed in that moment with her, something sacred happens. That silence, that stillness between the two of you starts to carry meaning. It starts to say things no words could ever communicate, because now you're not just holding her, you're holding space. And that space becomes a sanctuary, an emotional refuge in a world that never stops moving. She may not be able to explain it. She may not consciously realize what just happened, but her nervous system registers it, her heart remembers it. And that presence, that stillness, that will echo in her long after the moment has passed. And that's the thing about true presence. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't scream to be noticed. It's quiet, but it leaves a mark. Because when you're fully there with her, you're not just engaging with her body, you're acknowledging her soul. You're saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And how many people in her life have actually said that without words? This is why presence is so magnetic. It's not about playing a part or fitting into a mold. It's about being so secure in yourself that you don't have to perform. You don't need approval. You're not grasping for validation. You're just being. And in doing so, you invite her to be too. Not to impress, not to seduce, just to exist as herself. That kind of presence gives her permission to let down her guard, to stop managing impressions, to stop performing too. And when that happens, when two people can drop the masks and just meet each other where they are, the connection becomes unforgettable. Because now it's real. And here's where it becomes even more powerful. The man who can offer that kind of presence in a moment as intimate as a hug, without needing it to escalate or shift gears, creates trust. And trust is the foundation of any meaningful bond. It's what allows her to feel safe, not just with your hands, but with your energy, your silence, your restraint, your essence. She'll remember that. Maybe not the specifics, maybe not the exact position of your arms or the length of the embrace, but she'll remember the feeling. She'll remember how calm she felt in your presence, how valued, how known. And when you can leave someone with that, you don't need to chase attention, you become the attention. And this is why presence stays on her mind longer than any clever line or rehearsed gesture, because it isn't something you can fake. It's not a tactic, it's not a trick, it's a way of being. It's a decision to slow down, to actually care, to connect with her not for what you can get, but for who she is in that moment with you. So don't underestimate the power of a quiet moment. Don't overlook the impact of a still, grounded presence. Because in a world addicted to noise, to speed, to superficiality, that is what she remembers. Because presence is rare. And what's rare is unforgettable. There's something deeply powerful in the way you leave a moment. You can be captivating while you're there, yes, but it's how you exit that imprints itself in her mind. You know, people often think the beginning matters most, and to some extent it does, but endings, the way you wrap up an encounter, they linger, they echo, they define the emotional residue that stays with someone long after you are gone. And this is particularly true in intimacy. Even something as subtle and seemingly insignificant as a hug, when that moment concludes, if you understand how to exit it with purpose, presence, and grace, you plant yourself in her memory in a way that defies logic. See, most people are clumsy in their endings. They don't even think about them. They drift away distracted, or they shift the tone too quickly. Maybe they crack a joke or check their phone or rush into the next task like nothing just happened. And the problem with that is it cheapens the whole exchange. It sends the message that the moment didn't matter, that she didn't matter. But you have a different responsibility. Because if you've given her a moment of real connection, if you've held her with calm, anchored energy, then how you step away from that matters just as much as how you entered. Because the end frames the memory. It defines the emotional shape the entire experience will take in her mind. And if you rush it, or diminish it, or shrug it off, you risk undoing what you just created. So instead, when the time comes to release her, don't hurry, don't pull away like it's a transaction completed. Don't break the silence too quickly. Instead, slow down even further. Let your body communicate the same presence and intention on the way out that it did going in. Maybe you take a breath. Maybe you look at her for just a second longer, without pressure, without agenda, just to see her. And in that moment, you're telling her something far deeper than any compliment or promise could express. You're telling her, I'm not just here for what I can get, I'm here for what we shared. There's a humility in that, a respect. And respect is one of the most attractive things a man can offer. It doesn't mean worship. It doesn't mean you're submissive or overly accommodating. It means you value the moment. You recognize her humanity. You honor the space between you. And that's what she remembers. Not the hug itself, but the energy that followed, the aftermath, the stillness, the intention, and above all, the care. She remembers that you didn't rush, that you didn't smother, that you didn't joke your way out of it. You simply let her go with the same grounded energy with which you embraced her. And now something in her can't forget it. Not because you manipulated her emotions, but because you respected them. You didn't try to control the moment. You allowed it to breathe. This is why the man who understands endings is rare. Because it's not just about how you make her feel while you're there. It's about how you leave her when you go. Do you leave her feeling settled? Respected? A little more whole than before? Or do you leave her questioning whether it even mattered? You want her walking away with that quiet ache. Not of regret, but of remembrance. You want her to carry you with her, not because of some flashy performance, but because something about the way you handled the exit spoke to her subconscious. This man understands something most don't. That's what haunts her. That's what echoes in the spaces between her thoughts. That's what she replays, not in her mind, but in her nervous system, in the way she suddenly remembers how grounded she felt, how safe, how real. Because the truth is, we all crave to be met and left with intention. We long for someone to treat our presence as sacred. And when you give that, especially in the way you step away, you distinguish yourself from every man who's rushed, distracted, or emotionally shallow. So don't underestimate the power of how you leave, because the right departure can say everything you need to say without a single word. And when you do it right, you won't need to try and stay on her mind. You already will be, because when a man exits with grace, presence, and quiet strength, she doesn't just remember him, she feels him.